Buddy, I'm Candid Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure to rate, leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now joining me on CFL Talk, as usual, is David Morassutti. David, how you doing, buddy? Of Sportsnet. I should mention that. I always forget to mention that you're
Yeah,
part of
no, this is
you're
this
part of
is
the evil empire.
it's a busy time. I mean, obviously look, we got Raptors playoffs, we got Blue Jays are doing pretty well, and NHL playoffs are just around the corner. It's a busy time in Canadian sports right now, and it's only going to get busier. I mean, we got like it totally escaped me that this week it escaped me. I think mid last week I realized because I've been waiting for it. The NFL draft is this week.
Yeah, and there's a couple of Canadians that are up for that draft. We don't cover the NFL draft, but from the sense of it being a league that is being populated more and more by Canadian players who aren't offensive linemen.
Yeah, I think the article is going to be published tomorrow. I wrote about a couple of the Canadians looking to get their names called this week. So, a couple, actually, majority of them are from Ontario, believe it or not. You got John Mechie, who is the receiver out of Alabama, very good receiver, but also had his season cut short. He had a torn ACL.
Oh,
But I think he'll get quite a bit of he brings that speed. I mean, he's not a big receiver; he's a small receiver. So anyone that's looking for a small slot receiver that can make explosive plays could look to see him go second or third round. There's a linebacker out of Ottawa. His name was there's a couple of them. Um, Lucetta, Jesse Lucetta. There it is. Just I wrote about these guys today, and the names already escapes me. But Jesse Lucetta, he's from Ottawa. He played linebacker slash defensive end out of Penn State. Another Canadian kid there. A couple of them actually that have already been drafted in the CFL that are also trying to get in the NFL draft. There's one. It's the hardest name to pronounce. One of the more interesting names in this NFL draft. Actually, it's Louis. Well, I'm going when I see Luiji. It could
Luigi.
be I think Luigi, but it might be Louis Villain.
Oh, okay.
Um, he's from Wake Forest, so he's actually been drafted by the Argos. But obviously, he's been getting some visits with NFL teams. So there's another one there. Jake Julian, who is a punter who was selected by the Red Blacks. He's been getting a couple of visits as well. So it'll be very interesting. Oh, we have a comment here. Larry Langhill. How many more sleeps till training camps, CFL training camps? Good question, Larry.
Oh, I'll tell you. Hang on. I think I can. The
Well,
date is May 5th. I think. Hang on. I'll let me make sure I don't.
we're a few weeks away.
Where is? Oh, I didn't think I closed that. I just because today the CFL sent me an email reminding me of these important dates. The 3rd of May is the CFL draft. The 11th of May is rookie camp opens,
Yeah.
and the 15th of May training camp opens.
So we're not far. We're not close, but we're not too far either. We're a lot closer than we are further away. Let's just say.
Yeah.
Um, it's weird because obviously I'm not used to the CFL starting up in May. I'm used to the June time. It's going to be very interesting. I think Montreal has already announced plans of doing their camps in Laval, if I'm not mistaken. Like are starting to announce their training camp plans. Like that shows you how serious and how close we are to this season coming. And
Oh,
sooner or later, we're going to have games to talk about, which is kind of great because we've been kind of pushing along the last few months, trying to give as much content as we can.
Did you mention Patrice Rene?
He was actually another one I was going to mention. Yeah, he's DB, a defensive back who was
Yep.
he was drafted by Winnipeg. Another one that he's a weird one. He's had some injury issues. He had injury issues when he was with North Carolina. He finished his college career. He got a medical exemption to get an extra year, and he finished his college career in Rutgers. And he only played 5 games, but they're all against Big Ten teams. So that he's maybe a little bit more of a long shot to get drafted. Maybe he'll get an invite if he's got some scouts. It'll be very interesting. But yeah, he's another name that I had written down as well. So yeah, it's gonna be quite the next few weeks. CFL draft, we're yeah, as we we're getting close to that. They will be obviously trying. We've been trying to get someone to come and talk to us about the draft. Maybe hopefully we'll get it now that it's coming close. We'll get something around that time. Um,
Do you
but
think we'll have anybody as high or higher than the Eagles' offensive guard Danny Watkins? He was drafted number 23 overall.
so this year, so yeah, if we're like thinking about the NFL draft, yeah, I don't think we're gonna get one. Like, you know what? I thought going into last year, the last season of the NCAA, John Mechie would have been the closest. He would have been, I think, a for sure first rounder, maybe pushing late, but I think in that 15 to 25 range, which is a decent range. You're always getting a decent receiver out of that range. But yeah, I think the ACL injury, because he's still recovering from that, teams are not going to use their first round pick on someone who's got a torn ACL. And so I think it would have been nice. I think Mechie would have been the best opportunity to see one go higher than Watkins. But yeah, it would be a surprise if anyone went in the first round. I think
Look,
this
if
year.
if three if three four players are drafted that are Canadian, that's a good year,
You're just adding to the pipeline.
right? That's a good year. And the thing is, we talked about it today with the meetings with the coaches. Today I had a chance to talk to a couple of the coaches. We talked to Hamilton and Edmonton, and the same feeling as far as the draft is concerned. The coaches and the GMs involved on those two teams, of course, uh, the head coach of Chris Jones of the Edmonton Elk does everything. So he's the coach, the GM, and the chief bottle washer there.
Hmm.
Marv Alamang's son, um, who is responsible for that kind of stuff for the draft and stuff. They are really looking forward to picking a couple of Canadians. This is a year where the draft from last year was a pretty unfair situation for the players to be involved in, right, David? Because they
Yeah.
really didn't get a chance to showcase their ability. And then even once that happened, they weren't able really to make the team because training camp was not a thing. And that's who pays the price. We heard that today from both Edmonton and of course Hamilton, that how do you as a young player establish yourself with the team if you can't be at practice, if you can't be involved in training camp? It's really tough. So this year is going to be really interesting. And the final point I'll mention, and then you can comment on everything that I've said here. Now you've got 2-3 years worth of drafts where you're going to have players who are actually going to be on the field to compete against each other.
Yeah, and I think personally, I like to get these younger players involved. They bring fresh. It's nice. And these are guys that the athletes have changed, right? I feel like the athletes are much different now than what they were, even what 5, 10 years ago. Like it's totally changed, and I think yeah, this is a very unique situation. But I think you have to like the competition there. it's unfortunate that there's not more jobs for these kids. Like, if Halifax was, or I guess we'll call it Atlantic, was actually a thing, then we'd have a whole pipeline, another team for all these players to go to. And I think this is why, I haven't been pushing the idea of expansion that much, but this is probably the reason why we should be pushing for expansion, because it's more jobs for these Canadian players, because you got a whole, another team that's going to draft all of them, right? And so, yeah, I think competition's good. It's a bit of an unfair situation because for a lot of them, the last few years have been kind of tough to navigate, but I think it also has given them chances to refine their athletic skills, their refine kind of their mindset, and give them that opportunity to grow as profession into the professional ranks. But I mean, we've had our chances, Frank, to talk to some of these younger players, and we always have to remember that they're supposed to be the futures of the sport, right? They're the ones that are supposed to
Absolutely.
carry this league forward. And I think sometimes we disregard, because sometimes we're thinking too much about the veterans who have been here forever and have, but they're the ones who are paving the way, because they know that this next young wave has to keep it going.
Well, in what you were saying as far as an expansion team and bringing in more Canadian players, I think the bottom line is because we really don't know. We've listened to conversations, experts. We've listened to former coaches. Everybody talking about how the rules should or should not change in the Canadian Football League. Um, I do believe there's one important point that with expansion, whatever amount of Canadian players are deemed sufficient on any particular CFL team or all, there's another team that you could add a few. So you could subtract the amount of Canadians per team, let's say by one, and by virtue of introducing a new team, you can still, elevate the amount of Canadians that are in the league. I personally do not see the long term, and I emphasize long term benefit of lessening the amount of Canadians in the Canadian Football League. I think they are the underpinning strength of the game.
Mm-hmm.
They are the connection that is this country to the game of football. This game wasn't created with Americans in mind and then Canadians took over. It's been a Canadian game that we're more than willing and happy to include American players, but it has to be Canadian. It's not called the Canadian Football League of American football players. It's the Canadian Football League. And anything that gives even the impression that it's less Canadian, I don't think is a good idea, David.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about, what I think Canadians have so much to offer, right? We
Absolutely. We know that Canadians are great athletes.
here's the thing, they're all going from Canada to go and play in the States, a lot of them, whether it's basketball, whether it's, now we're seeing with hockey too, right? The opportunities, some of them feel,
That's
I
the
don't.
word, though. You've used the most important word, that opportunities for Canadian football players.
Yeah, right. They, unfortunately, I mean, look, a lot of them give a lot of credit to the CFL, but it's never the primary focus for them, right? The primary
That's
focus is,
understandable, but I
which
kind of
is,
get offended by that remark, though.
well, yeah, of course.
That's like saying, I don't want to play music because if I can't play in the United States, I'm not going to do it for just Canada. And I'm using that particular example on purpose.
If I can even make this
Can you
example, it's
imagine the
all,
artists that we would lose if that
yeah, but
you know
it's also like, I've been a big F1 fan, but especially more so now. Would you rather go and race in Formula One, or would you rather go and do your, IndyCar
NASCAR or NASCAR?
or NASCAR, right? NASCAR, very American, very, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of heritage behind it. But we don't already know Formula One is where the money's at, it's where the fame is at, it's where everything, it's what everyone aspires to, and really, that's the cream of the crop, that's the mountaintop.
Absolutely.
You
It's no different than when you look at the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA. When you talk about the very best, that has a cachet that is not, it's not comparable, right? Uh, basically, basically, NASCAR is driving in a circle.
yeah.
It's very simple, but it's loved by many because, as is said, you know, 90% of the people who go to NASCAR races are going there to see the cars crash. They're waiting to see that. So
No, yeah.
and the drivers themselves, they tempt that fate, right? How many fights do we see at the end of a race because somebody did something somebody else thought they shouldn't do? I'm not saying that there's not, the same kind of embattlement in F1. Just look at Lewis Hamilton and his teammates. He has a hard time getting along with them. So, it happens in racing. It's very, but though all I'm trying to say is that every sport has its attraction. Every sport has its cachet. And with the Canadian Football League, it is the Canadian players. As much as American players want to think that they're the center of the Canadian Football League, they aren't really the center of the game. It's the Canadian players, not because of the players, but because of what they represent. They represent the game being played in Canada. And I will never let go of that thought. That's what makes Canadian players imperative in the Canadian Football League. That is, even when the Canadian Football League is suffering and doesn't have a good year or a good game, one thing they always have are the supporters for the Canadian players, their family, their friends that know them, former teammates. It's not a lot of people, but it's a very strong, I believe, foundation.
Yeah, and when I think about what's been talked about with the ratio lately, and what's been said about, and what I've heard some of the, I have no problem if an American player or global player that comes to play in the CFL wants to make the CFL their long term home, make Canada their long term home. I have no problem with doing the nationalized, making them a national player in that regard. If you're pretty much giving you're giving the rest of your life to playing here, of course.
That's a
It's
window
the
you could use.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's been talked about a lot more. What I have the issue with are the players who come here for, the minimum, not even the minimum 2 years in some cases. They try to get a one and done and then try to scamper back to the NFL or wherever. I do have a bit of a problem with that because in essence, yeah, the Canadian Football League is about, it's all about, the fans and creating the product for the fans. But if you're going to try to build something sustainable, you can't be having players who are just going to be one and done, and that's not a feasible model.
I understand and don't disagree with what you're saying
Mhm.
at all. But I have to say this is that rather than go from that perspective, I know what you're getting at, and maybe the way I would frame it would be rewarding players who stay in the Canadian Football League, who come from the United States, and we treat them like Canadian citizens that seek naturalization, which is basically saying, I really like being Canadian. I'd like to be one. And here's the proof of why I believe I can prove I want to be one. And I'm just throwing this number out here. After a player plays five years in Canada in the Canadian Football League, they get to be considered as a Canadian. That would satisfy um, for the most part, it would satisfy the need that people feel they have to have less Canadian born players than American born players because of the reality. And we've discussed this before. The reality is that there's some weakness when it comes to Canadians because they're not as well trained as Americans. I get that. But I really believe that we should have Americans that are playing here in the Canadian Football League who want to be in the Canadian Football League, not just by yap talking about it, but actually voting with their feet and their butts. Where they
Mhm.
plant their feet and their butts is what matters. So if there's a American players, because I'm very proud of the American players that come to this country to play football, and I'm very proud of this, folks. The ones that stay and then start teaching our kids how to play the game. There's nothing I feel more prouder than that. That to me is total appreciation for the Canadian Football League, the Canadian Football League fans, and Canadian football in general. So I don't see why we don't do that. With what you're saying, make them Canadian, and then you just make a bar and you say, okay, after 5 years, this guy's considered a Canadian.
It's when you were bringing this up, it always reminds me of what MLB's rule is. Remember the 10-5 rights?
Oh, yeah, yeah. The free
You
agents.
play 10 years, you accrue 10 years of major league service in the MLB, and you spend 5 consecutive years with one team. You're allowed to veto any trade situation. So how can the CFL adopt something similar? Well, if a player's accrued a certain number of time with one team, they should be rewarded for the fact that they are, sticking around and making it, being a part of a team for so long. There should be some sort of incentive. We talk about
I know a lot of
franchise.
fans that would love to hear that kind of,
Yeah,
that kind of plan.
these are things that build fan bases. This is builds a good
Continuity,
rapport, continuity, and for the players, they will love it.
recognizability, recognizability.
Like, I know some players will like to go, try for different opportunities that give them the best chance to win, make the most money. But if they can do it while staying in the one place that they they know and they are comfortable and it's a situation that works, why shouldn't teams do the best to make sure that they keep that going?
Absolutely. I mean, why not suggest, and I think you're right, that, maybe fans, we talk about players that they should play for the name on the front, not the name in the back, right? But here's the reality: fans cheer for the name on the back. And sometimes the name on the back, in regards to the team concept, isn't important. But from a fan perspective, it truly is. I really find it, important that the Canadian Football League find a way to have players stay on the same team. I really do believe a lot of fans, not that we lose fans, maybe we do. Maybe we lose fans because they're going, well, I'm sick and tired of the merry-go-round that is the Canadian Football League, where I don't even know who the players on our team are anymore, and I have season tickets. You know, I know there's people like that out there because I hear from them, right? And what can we do to make them feel like the league is built for them
Well,
more?
yeah, I think first off, give them access to content, more content year round, right? There's too much of a dormant
This is
period
a bad
between,
this is a bad year for that, David. We both know that.
right? Frank, you and I have been trying to keep
That
a once a week show going. Um, Look, there are ways you can get around the CFL off season. Every network that covers a league in some way, shape, or form finds a way to keep the interest going. There might not always be news to talk about, but there are ways you can keep the conversation going. And
yeah,
that's the
thing is,
problem the CFL has.
the thing is, it doesn't. People haven't, unfortunately, until it gets monetized. You're not going to get the
Yep.
kind of reaction from TV networks and TV stations, the newspapers and other media that could help, you know, advertise the Canadian Football League. Will do it if it sells, advertising. Interest is not the only thing that drives them. Um, and I say, and I'm not trying to put myself down because I'm not going to put you in the same boat as me, but not everybody's willing to go and do something, literally for very little or nothing. That's the reality of where we are. The Canadian Football League this year. I've said this before, David, and I just want to make sure that I want people to know that I agree with you that the CFL hasn't done a very good job between seasons lately. This season, in fact, they haven't done a great job in promoting the league and in offering information, talkable points from their perspective. We've heard a lot of conversations that are started by Three Down Nation, by people who make comments on Twitter, Facebook posts. We need to hear more from the league. You're right.
No, we do, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all to funnel and drive interest into the product on the field, right? Get more people to buy those season tickets. You know, there's right now, I think another big problem is there is no network dedicated to talking about the CFL all year long. There really isn't, right? There's no NFL network, there's no NHL network, there's no MLB network. I'm not saying you need to have a 24/7 channel, but having something a few days a week to keep things fresh. And we're in an age, it
Well,
doesn't have to be on
I'm
television.
hoping that the CFL gets some money from somewhere because a lot of
Hmm.
I don't want to sound like a CFL apologist. I'm a realist, I think. And I just don't think personally that they have the money right now to do the kind of work they want to do.
Yeah.
I think there are people there who understand that what you're saying is it makes total sense that we need to get out there. If I was the CFL, we need to be out there. We need to have our, our name out there. We need to have our stories being told out there. And they are, as far as written is concerned, but people are visual. And there isn't enough of the visual representation of the Canadian Football League. If the Canadian Football League covered itself as well as they do the draft, the Canadian draft, which they've done a marvelous job, right? It's the rest of the football news that needs to be covered. There are missed opportunities, in my opinion, of free agency. There are missed opportunities, you know, uh, basically how are the players that are coming back, the ones that got signed, what are they doing now, that type of thing. I just there's a dearth of information when it comes to the Canadian Football League right now, and hopefully it'll start to improve. I had a chance today to talk to some coaches, another opportunity to talk to coaches about the upcoming draft and how their teams are doing, and I'm impressed with the people they have the people, they have the players, they have the management. Everything's just it's like you can taste the success. Now we just want to see it after what we've gone through the past couple of years.
Yeah, no. I think there needs to be less bashing about what we have off on the field because, yeah, you're right. We have the infrastructure of every team has what it needs to be to run a successful team. Sure, would the players like to
Every
be
team.
Yeah,
Let me emphasize that. Every team in the Canadian Football League right now is in better shape as a whole than they've ever been. There is not a weak link any longer in the Canadian Football League, whether it be ownership or management. Right now, I'm telling you that, and I'm believing it, and I'm not selling it as any kind of fool's gold. It is true. BC has really straightened out their ownership and their management team, as has Ottawa. Montreal did the year before, and Toronto the year before that, and all the rest were in pretty good shape 2 3 years ago. So the improvements have been made all across the board in the Canadian Football League. We will have the most competitive season we've seen in years, thanks to training camp, opportunity for offenses to look better than they did the past couple of years will exist. And I really am promoting this as one of the best Canadian Football League seasons ever. That's my prediction.
also the return of preseason games.
Yes, important.
Yeah, like I think a lot of these leagues, a lot of people, oh, why do they have these preseason games? It's
Oh,
because we
when
don't
you don't have
want
them, you know why. You
we
learn
don't
why when you don't.
yeah, we don't want these sluggish, you know, 9-6 barely putting up any offense at the start of the season. Start of the season is supposed to be the most exciting part where things are just pushing, going, going, going. There's a reason why spring training is so important for baseball players. Pitchers need to hit a certain count to get themselves ready for the start of the season. Hitters need to get their timing. You don't think the CFL players
Can
they
I
can
can I
practice?
can I tell you
Go ahead.
something? Today we had the coach say that today in our they said it exactly. They said offenses need time to get through the repetition to make this stuff happen. They need training camp and they need exhibition games. And so the people that really know this game, GMs, coaches, and such, they said it today, and that confirms what you're saying. I just want you to know what you're talking about is something I heard today from the experts, and I agree with you.
Right? Like receivers need to get their. I think a big part of the reason why we're not seeing those big shots down the field, the timing between quarterback and receiver isn't there. We saw running games do a lot better. I think we've seen the run game take more prevalence because teams are saying, why are we going to try to keep this, always going deep and having these quick 2 and outs and putting our defense in a hole, right? Let's slow it down a bit. Let's get the running game going. Let's get these shorter passes. Let's chip away rather than let's go for those long bombs that produce more excitement, produce more potential for a higher score. I think that's where the CFL needs to realize that improving that part of the game, the part of the game that brings the most excitement, it's the quarterbacks, it's the receivers doing what makes them successful, but also being put in a position where they can get there. And they're not there right. They weren't there last year. I hope you're right this year. I think we're seeing players right now practicing with each other to get themselves in a position where they can um
Be their best when they get
yeah.
here. You know who else said something today? Chris Jones said the CFL needs to start working on getting a nice group of quarterbacks. We need work on making quarterbacks better in the Canadian Football League. We need to find better quarterbacks and make our quarterbacks better. Chris Jones made that one of the most important things that he felt that needed to be improved in the CFL to make it, you know, they were obviously, media from time to time reporters will ask, what do you think of the stuff that they're talking about? Changing the rules, changing the game, getting rid of Canadians, all that stuff. And Chris Jones cut through the chaff and said, you know what? We just got to find ourselves some better quarterbacks. We got to create better quarterbacks. The Canadian Football League, without the kind of quarterbacks that Chris Jones knows are necessary. And you know what? You and I know that. And I think any casual viewer of the Canadian Football League, as long as they've seen at least 5 or 6 games, understands how important a good quarterback is. And that is one of the things that, unfortunately, the past couple of years, I'll give you another reason. Why haven't the quarterbacks looked good? We talked about training camp. We talked about exhibition games. Offense takes more reps to be effective. Unfortunately, we've had the best quarterback in the Canadian Football League was inundated with hits, retired last year, and the guy who basically you could say was just as good has admitted to Bo Levi Mitchell that he's had a tough couple of injury plagued years, and he's hoping this year will be the year where he doesn't have to contend with nagging injuries. So that's another reason why training camp and why exhibition games matter, because the protection of a quarterback is not something that is learned or worked on through osmosis. It's through repetition and planning, and it needs a lot of planning because you have to, as a group, react together. Defense can run independently. You can have linebackers, you can have defensive linemen acting in confusion. Well, that's what they want to do because that's what they're trying to foster, confusion. Offenses need predictability. They need to know how far down the field. You said it, and you're 100% right. How far down the field am I going to be when you throw me the ball? How fast do I look like I'm going? But how fast am I actually going? These are things that you learn in practice, in reps, repetition. This is how that happens, which is why I said this year will be a better year in the Canadian Football League. It'll be one of the better years we've had in a while. And hopefully, we'll have the talented quarterbacks to execute my belief. That's all I can hope for. It's all I can say for now.
Yeah, like you brought up Bo Levi Mitchell. You don't think a healthy Bo Levi Mitchell doesn't make a big difference in terms of how many points are put on the board? Like he was scratching and clawing to get things going last year. You could tell this was not the same Bo Levi Mitchell that was dominating the CFL, in 2016, 2017, and 2018. It was not the same Bo Levi Mitchell. Age didn't help. I understand that, but injuries don't
That's
either.
something everybody has to battle. All of us have to battle that. Father time always wins. It's just a question of when. It's just an eventuality. But what we do know about Bo Levi Mitchell is he has a football mind, and he has the ability to orchestrate an offense. Given the you know all things being equal, he's one of the best quarterbacks we've had in the Canadian Football League over the past 10 years. So let's be clear about that. Injuries can
Mhm.
cause problems that even defenses can't cause. So, I'm going to cut him slack. I'm looking forward to a healthier Bo Levi Mitchell, and with that, let's face it, a better Calgary Stampeder team.
Yeah, and I think Bo Levi Mitchell, you're right on that one. I think what's hurt Bo Levi Mitchell is, and he even said in his interview, is that he's more of a one tool player quarterback. He doesn't have the running ability.
Ah,
He's not right. That means you have to be very good at throwing the football. Well, if that part of your game is hampered, you don't have something that can rescue it, right? He's not, he's not, Vernon Adams that can dance out of the pocket or take a few moments to give
that's a
himself more.
scary admission to make, though. Let me tell you.
But he's the one that made that admission too, and I'm just like, wow. I think it also just shows that to be a quarterback in a lot of these leagues now, having that other thing that makes you good can really help your game and it prolong your career. I mean, in some cases, it also does the exact opposite.
David, it's becoming less and less a question of what type of quarterback you are. Now, by definition, you have to be able to be fleet of foot. I mean, just take a look at what's going on in the NFL. Take a look what's going in the Canadian Football League. If you're a passer that can't be mobile, and let's be clear about this, mobility, like in everything, uh, when we talk about speed, there's outright speed, and then there's quickness, right? When we talk about quarterbacks, it's more about quickness and elusibility. If you have to be elusive, right? So it's not as important to be like lightning fast, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about, look at Zach Caleros. I think he is the prototypical Canadian Football League quarterback of the 2020s. He is elusive, he is quick, and if you can't hold him, he'll kill you. And by kill you, I got to be careful because we're on the internet now. You can't even use that word. I'll be deleted for about a week. I'll be suspended. By that I mean you can destroy another team. Well, maybe I can't use that one because he can do that. All jokes aside, he can destroy a team not with his feet, but his ability to avoid you for a matter of milliseconds when he can throw the dagger that wins the game. We saw that in two Grey Cups.
Yeah, no, for sure. Right. And it also helped Trevor, Zach Claros, they had Andrew Harris.
Yeah.
No,
Well, you said Trevor Harris. Now here's a guy who
yeah,
gets the bum deal as far as he's not a running quarterback. I don't know. I've seen him take off down the field for 20 yards. Again, it's about quickness and elusiveness. You have either of those, you can be a Canadian Football League quarterback. If you have neither of those, now you got a problem. Now you're saying as Bo Levi Mitchell says, he's a one. No, I don't think he is. He can have some elusibility. and for him to have it, he's going to have to change his footwork. He's going to have to change some things. That's the true challenge of a man who's getting older, as a human being who's getting older. Is he capable of changing? Is he an old dog that can learn new tricks? He's identified that he lacks an important trick. Well, he's going to have to figure out how to imitate that trick somehow to some degree, because zero is not enough. Zero is not enough. He's got to be able to run to some extent.
No, he does. I think too many of the I think there's been too much of the too many people saying, well, these quarterbacks that always run, they have such a short lifespan because or shelf span in terms of their career because they're always prone to injury. This is true, but it's those that can master both, right? They don't necessarily have to be the best runner, but they if they know how to use it to their advantage, oh boy, like it makes such a difference. That's why I thought Cody Fajardo would have more success because if he we know he can run, we know he's hard to bring down. If he could get the throwing, the pass, his passing game to be, it doesn't have to be the like Bo Levi Mitchell level, but it can be at a decent level. There's a reason why Saskatchewan thought he was going to be.
Well,
They made him one of the top eight.
they still seem to have faith in
Yeah.
him. I mean, no, regardless of Chris Jones, and again, he had to defend his statement about Fajardo. Seems every time I see him in an interview, he has to talk about Saskatchewan and their quarterbacking problems. Um, yeah, no, you're right, and the elusivity is important. Being elusive is important. Having a great arm is important. But I think even more important than any one of those things is the combination of everything, right? And I think Bo Levi hit the nail on the head when he said I'm a one trick pony. Well, I'm putting words in his mouth, but I'm just, you know, he's identifying his issue, and I think by him admitting that, trust me when I say this, I truly believe this because he's an honest, hardworking guy who's a star, not by accident. By saying that, he's recognized it, and trust me, he's probably working on his footwork as we're speaking. In fact, he's probably watching this right now, and he's saying, "Yeah, you got that right. I'm working on that," and I know he is, and he's going to be working on that. He's too smart a player because that's to be a quarterback and to be a football player, you're going to have to be pretty smart. I've seen some of the playbooks, and never mind just quarterbacks, every player in a football team, they really do have to be able to read and comprehend. Reading comprehension is a strong point in football for players.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those positions where you just have to your test. You have to be able to know both sides of the game, right? You have to be able to read the defense, what the defense is throwing at you, the pre-read snaps. Then you have to also remember which route is every receiver running. What's my protection like? What are my it's almost like what are my escape options if something goes wrong? Like the quarterback has to process like a million things in one time.
And then and then once they understand, they have to go on the field. Why we need training camp, why we need exhibition games, because
Mhm.
they have to see the game plan as it develops and in real time what's going on, what happens.
Yeah, like it's one of those things where it's it's almost like when you're putting on a rehearsal for a dance. If one part of the dance is out of sync, if is out of rhythm, the whole thing is ruined. You just are gonna be struggling to get it back.
So good
And
news with training camp and exhibition games then.
yes, I think you know what we might not like covering like watching them because they don't mean. And I'm going to use this very loosely. They don't mean anything. They mean something to the players, right? And for us, you know what? As someone who covers the league, I get a chance to see what these guys are like. You know, you kind of get to you get it's our homework. It's our chance to see things when on the practice field and putting it out there, and we get a chance to formulate opinions on certain things, right? We can start to develop some of these preseason narratives, right, based
Well,
off
how
of what
about
we're
this
seeing.
one? How about this one? I got a
Mhm.
preseason narrative for you.
Mhm.
If you're Nick Arbuckle and you heard today that Chris Jones said he's looking for a bunch of quarterbacks, how would you feel?
I would really like to know. Nick Arbuckle, we know he is one of the nicest people. He won't speak ill about anybody. But I have to think that he is having some very he is getting maybe a little annoyed, but maybe that's by design.
You mean
Maybe
he's
this
trying? You
is
mean Jones is trying to kick the nice out of him?
Jones is trying to he's trying to light that competitive spark. And as a head coach, you need to get the best out of your players. Coaches have different ways of doing it. Maybe this
Respect,
is yeah,
anger.
right. Nick Arbuckle has had a very tough road since leaving Calgary, thinking this was his chance to become an established starting quarterback in the league, and now the coach that him thinking that this is my chance right now, and my coach is talking about we don't have a quarterback. That's gonna tick me off personally. I like considering everything that
Well,
Nick
David,
Arbuckle has been through.
if it's true that he wasn't vaccinated, if it's true that he wasn't vaccinated and that's why the Argos traded him, I'm not saying that's true. I'm just that was a rumor out there. I'm just trying to make a point. If that was true, that he basically didn't have a team because he wasn't vaccinated, and now vaccinations are becoming less imperative, less important, and not important, just less important, and we're driven less as far as getting vaccinated is concerned in society. And this guy now is in Edmonton, and he gets a chance to play, which he hasn't had a real chance to play. He stopped playing in Toronto before they traded him. It's not like he played and then they traded him. He wasn't playing for a while, and it didn't look like he was going to play. There was talk that it was cap issues that caused him to be traded. The fact that some rumors said that he hadn't been vaccinated, which would have been a problem for him because of MLSC and the rules that they stipulated. So this guy's a nice guy, like you said, but Chris Jones isn't the guy who gives jobs away. One thing he's a football guy and he's a player guy, but he's a
Mhm.
player guy who says, "Player, show me what you got." I mean, he's dealt with some pretty interesting characters like Carter, and he's bringing them back. So it's not like he has this unforgiving, mean-spirited attitude. No, Chris Jones has this, whatever it is, this Southern culture, this idea that you got to prove to me you belong here. Whether we can argue about whether he has too high a level of expectation or not, we can argue about that. But we know he has it, and we know that Arbuckle, being a nice guy, is going to have to get over that hump, and some of it's going to have to be some anger and some frustration and some hard work in being insulted by the fact that he doesn't have his respect and he'll want to earn it. That's what I'm hoping happens there with Arbuckle, because I agree with you. He's a nice man, nice family, good human being. I hope he becomes the kind of quarterback Edmonton traded for.
Yeah, and the one that a lot of these teams thought he could be, and then decided he wasn't that. Right? I I have a hard time believing Toronto doesn't trade him, regardless of the salary thing, if they
I
think that he was good enough to be a starting quarterback for them.
I
Right?
just
Because
don't think quarterbacks got a fair shake these past couple of years. I think it's the toughest job in the Canadian Football League was quarterback in the past couple of years. I mean, I don't know of any success stories. Name me a success story over the season other than Caleros.
oh,
Name me one other
not
than Caleros. And the only reason he's a success story is because he won the Grey Cup. How can you not be successful winning the Grey Cup?
yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think.
Who's
Right?
been a success story? They're not out there. They're not out there. This is the problem with the Canadian Football League right now. At this very moment, take a snapshot. The perception of quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League is at its lowest point that I can remember, and I'm old.
Mhm.
So now what are we talking about? We're talking about what Chris Jones said today. I said it a few minutes ago that Chris Jones said the CFL needs to work on getting quarterbacks, not as a team. as a league.
Man.
That's heavy, but that's the truth. That's the today. I listened for 2 hours to interviewers. People ask questions, and that's the salient point that sticks. It's just chewing away at my head, and I'm going. I've been trying to think, say this, and now I heard Chris Jones say it, and now I'm going. I'm not crazy. Quarterbacking is a problem in the Canadian football. We don't need to change the rules. What we need to do is to create quarterbacks. Now, if the rules are in the way of creating great quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League, then let's talk about it. But I don't think it's four downs. Maybe it's moving the hash marks. I don't know.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, every quarterback's skill and ability is based on mechanics, which is the human side of the position. That's what we need to work on. We need to make sure that we have quarterbacks up here and in their feet and in their arms and have the ability as a league to produce excellent quarterbacks. We don't have that right now. We got excuses, the pandemic, no training camp, no exhibition games. We got excuses. So this is now the time. The clock's ticking on the Canadian Football League. They got to clean this up. They got to straighten it out. Listen, I'm a diehard Canadian Football League fan. I'm dying to see really good. Sorry, I used the word dying. I might get deleted again. I'm really hoping. I'm just making fun of the internet because it sucks. So I'm basically hopeful that somebody out there understands what Chris Jones said, and I'm hoping Chris Jones said something that they're all saying together in unison. Every Canadian Football League team, they're all saying the same thing. We need to create an environment where we have great quarterbacks. Can we do that? Because we all know they need to.
Right. I think the other thing too is instead of trying to change rules, maybe these quarterbacks should actually have a coach, their own coach. Maybe I'm going to bring up the coaches cap again. I'm sorry, but if you're going to limit the ability for teams to have the best coaches for the players, what are we doing? What like are we do we really think that this is something that's going to help the game by having a level playing field on what you can spend on coaching? I think
Well,
the teams
David, the
that's
money's is what it is. So what you're saying is, I'm going to say what I'll throw at you is this: you're asking for teams to prioritize coaching quarterbacks.
not just coaching quarterbacks, just coaching players, right? But I
Well, they
do
got
think the one position you cannot have one person in charge of it all is quarterback. You need to have a group, someone that can work with the quarterbacks. Because we just said it. Look how much is needed at the quarterback position. Get them the coaching they need because there's so much asked of them. There's so much of the success and failure relies on them. Get them the resources they need.
There's no doubt about that. I got to say that I truly believe that the biggest problem with the Canadian Football League is the fact that it does not have the financial wherewithal to overcome a lot of things that it needs to overcome. And that's number one, the biggest problem they have. It's been exacerbated by COVID because now all of a sudden, a lot of money, the money that they were getting, which wasn't a lot, they weren't getting at all. So, this is the reality, folks. If you're a Canadian Football League fan, the reality is that this organization, this league, needs as much luck to be successful this coming year as they do anything else because this has been a financial tough situation for the Canadian Football League. I wouldn't want to be an owner of a team because it's so hard. It's so hard for them to create the kind of game that we all know the Canadian Football League can be. So all we can hope for is that we see something this year, at the beginning of the year, throughout the year, a progression where we see that there's something happening in the Canadian Football League that was missing the last couple of years that we've seen before. This game can be played in a more exciting fashion than even the Canadian football than the National Football League. In fact, I'll end it by saying this. You said it yourself on Twitter. They're playing CFL football in the NFL playoffs. baby. That's what it's about. That's the Canadian Football League. That's what we saw. Now, if only we can put it together. And I'm not putting pressure on anybody. I'm putting pressure on everybody. This is going to be a tough situation.
And it's not going to get any easier.
Nope. And I don't and I don't envy the position the teams are in, but they've got great coaches, great GMs. They've got great ownership now. This league, at least at its root, has a good jumping off point to this season. 2022 has to be the resurrection of the Canadian Football League. And it doesn't have to be like it was at its best time. It just has to look like it's on its way to that. That's all it has to look like, in my opinion. Candidly speaking.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, it was fun as usual, David.
Always fun.
We're like that show. What was it? What was the show? Oh, never mind. The show about nothing. This is the show about nothing when it comes to the Canadian Football League. A lot of talking, but nothing really said. Hopefully you enjoyed whatever we didn't say. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Frank.
For David Morassutti, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk Aaron Live Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you for watching. I'm Candid Frank. Oh, I didn't make it in time.